This message may not match what you expected, and the slight discomfort or resistance you feel right now is the first indication that you are prepared to hear what your inner self already understands. You arrived seeking confirmation that this person would return, that the waiting would finally end, and that the silence would transform into reunion. But the universe has brought you here for a different kind of clarity. At times, the greatest form of cosmic love is not the promise of someone coming back, but the permission to let go. It is not a prediction of reconciliation, but the blessing of closure. This is not a message telling you to wait longer, hold on tighter, or invest your hope in a future that asks you to neglect your present. This is the message that shows you have moved to the next stage. The lesson has reached its conclusion, and the door you believed was closing because of heartbreak is actually opening toward your freedom. Not every separation is temporary, and not every silence is meant to break. Some endings are not pauses but clear conclusions, necessary and defining, making space for a new story to begin with a foundation that does not fade. You have been waiting for a sign, and this is the one. Although it arrives differently than you imagined and reveals a truth you have avoided accepting, it is still the answer you needed. The universe does not always respond to our prayers in the exact form we request. Sometimes it responds to the deeper prayer beneath the surface, the one our soul expressed when our mind was too hesitant to hear it. Your soul has been asking for freedom, even while your heart hoped for their return. And now, in this moment, both prayers are aligning. Write "I am ready to hear truth" in the comments if you are prepared to receive this message. If you are strong enough to accept what love becomes when it stops pleading and begins respecting itself, then this message is for you. Not every powerful connection is meant to last, and the intensity of your emotions does not dictate how long someone will stay. Some people enter your life with the force of revelation, shaking the foundations you built on unstable ground, making you feel more alive in a few months than you had in years before them. And yet, they are still not meant to remain. These individuals are soul teachers, disguised as soulmates, catalysts wrapped in the language of forever. Mirrors appearing at the exact moment you needed a clear view of yourself, even if that honesty disrupted your comfort. This person was the earthquake, not the structure, the wildfire that cleared what no longer belonged, not the garden that would grow afterward. They were not meant to be the final destination, but the disruption that redirected you toward it. Carl Jung recognized this when he spoke of meaningful encounters that break open the psyche, experiences that push us to face what we have kept hidden in the shadows. Not because these people are meant to stay, but because they are meant to initiate transformation. Some relationships exist not to complete us, but to reveal us. They expose the parts of ourselves we have ignored, denied, or pushed down beneath layers of politeness and performance. This person showed you your ability to feel deeply, to commit fully, and to experience emotions beyond what you believed you could hold. In doing so, they fulfilled their meaningful role in your life. The intensity was genuine, the connection unmistakable, and the transformation permanent. Yet none of this means they were meant to remain beyond the season of their teaching. You've been confusing the depth of the lesson with the permanence of the teacher. Mistaking the awakening they sparked for a sign that they must stay. But spiritual truth moves differently than romantic expectation. Not everyone who opens your eyes is meant to walk beside you in the light. Some hand you the lamp and then return to the darkness from which they emerged. And your responsibility is not to follow them back into the shadows, but to continue forward with what they helped you see. There are insights hidden within this pain, lessons woven so deeply into the heartbreak that the wisdom and the wound cannot be separated. And now it is time to acknowledge what this person gave you, even as their absence cost you something significant. They showed you your strength by challenging it, by creating moments that required you to rise when every part of you wanted to collapse. They pushed you to edges you didn't know you had and watched to see whether you would fall or find steady ground on that narrow ledge. Each time you endured another disappointment, another broken promise, another moment of feeling unseen by someone you recognized so clearly, you were developing resilience that will shape every relationship that comes after this one. They taught you boundaries by crossing them, by revealing what it feels like when someone does not honor your needs, does not respect your limits, and does not treat your heart as the sacred space it is. And in that disregard, they planted the seed of your refusal to ever accept such treatment again. They revealed your worth by undervaluing it, creating such a sharp contrast between what you deserved and what you received that you could no longer ignore the difference. You could no longer rationalize, minimize, or explain your way into accepting less than what your soul required. This is the difficult grace of relationships that diminish us. They show us clearly and undeniably what we will no longer tolerate. And that clarity becomes the guide that leads us toward people who will appreciate what this person overlooked. They taught you that love without reciprocity is not love but performance. That intensity without consistency is not connection but instability. That potential without follow-through is not promise but illusion, and these lessons are ones you could not have learned from someone who treated you well. This relationship was a spiritual curriculum designed for your growth, each painful chapter a necessary course in self-knowledge, self-respect, and self-restoration. They were not the villain of your story, but the catalyst of your initiation, the one whose inability to meet you became the reason you learned to meet yourself. You have been seeking closure through their words, their apology, their acknowledgement. But the closure you are searching for is already present in who you have become because of what you lived through. The lesson is complete, not because they changed, but because you finally did. It is not that they will not love you in the way you need, it is that they cannot. And there is an important difference between these two forms of impossibility that you must understand if you want to free yourself from the cycle of waiting. Will not implies choice. It suggests that beneath their hesitation lies the ability to show up, an ability they are deliberately refusing to use. It creates the illusion that with enough patience, enough proof, or enough perfection on your part, you could persuade them to become someone they are not. Cannot is the truth that liberates you. They do not have the emotional structure, the psychological development, or the spiritual readiness to offer the kind of love you need. No amount of your effort can build in them what they have not built in themselves. You have been loving someone at a consciousness they have not yet reached, speaking a depth they do not yet understand, offering a presence they are not prepared to receive or return. This is not a judgment of their value as a person, but an honest recognition of where they are in their own growth, and where they stand is not where you are. The distance between these two places is not something you can close by trying harder or waiting longer. Some people are still learning lessons you completed long ago, still repeating mistakes you already paid for, still operating from wounds you have already healed. And you cannot pull them across that gap through the strength of your devotion alone. You have outgrown this dynamic, even if you have not fully admitted it to yourself yet, even if acknowledging it feels like betraying everything you invested in trying to make this work. Growth is not always about adding. Sometimes it is about releasing, letting go of connections that once fit but now restrict. Stepping back from people you love, but can no longer keep in the closest parts of your life. They are not bad, and you are not abandoning them. You are simply recognizing that love is not enough when it lacks compatibility, reciprocity, and the capacity to create something stable and nourishing for both people. You fell in love with who they could become, with the glimpses of potential you saw beneath their fear and dysfunction, with the version of them that surfaced in rare moments of honesty or clarity and made you believe that if you stayed long enough, gave enough, and proved yourself enough, that potential would finally solidify into consistency. This is one of the most tempting traps of unfulfilled love, the belief that seeing someone's highest self is enough to call it forward, that your vision of their possibilities will become the plan they use to rebuild their life. that your faith in who they could be will outweigh their dedication to who they currently are. But potential is not a person. It is only a possibility, and possibilities without action are simply hopeful illusions we use to justify staying in situations that drain us. You cannot love someone into an evolution they have not chosen. You cannot heal wounds they refuse to face. You cannot build a future with someone who is still avoiding their present. The person you fell in love with, the bright vision of their highest self, exists mostly in your imagination and in the brief moments when they rise to meet it, only to fall back into the patterns that feel safer, more familiar, and more aligned with who they have chosen to be. Subscribe if you are ready to stop waiting for potential to turn into reality. If you are ready to love people as they truly are rather than who you hope they might become. If you are ready to stop offering your worth to those who cannot recognize its value. Every day you spend waiting for someone to become who you need is a day you are not spending finding someone who already is. It is a day invested in a future that depends on someone else changing instead of a present where you're already seen, already valued, already appreciated as you are. The universe is not asking you to abandon belief in this person's potential. It is asking you to stop surrendering your life for it, to stop pausing your own growth while you wait for them to catch up to a version of themselves they may never choose to embrace. There is a reckoning that must take place, an honest assessment of what this prolonged waiting is costing you, what it is taking from the limited resources of your time, your energy, and your ability to remain open to a love that does not require you to plead for it. Every day you remain tied to someone who cannot meet you where you are is a day you cannot fully meet yourself. A day you cannot fully show up for the opportunities and connections trying to reach you because they cannot get past the barrier created by your devotion to someone who is not equally devoted to you. This is the opportunity cost of holding on, the unseen price you pay in closed doors, missed moments, and potential futures that fade before they begin because you are too focused on keeping hope alive in a garden that refuses to grow. Every day you wait for them to change is a day you do not encounter your true match, the person who exists right now, perhaps also waiting, perhaps also wondering if they will ever find someone who sees them as clearly as you see someone who does not truly see you in return. Somewhere in the vast movement of human connection, there are people moving toward you who will never make you question your worth, who will not leave you examining breadcrumbs for signs of interest, who will not expect you to perform or shrink to fit into the small spaces they offer. But you cannot welcome them while your hands are still holding someone who keeps letting go of you. You cannot hear them calling while you are still straining to interpret the silence of someone who will not speak. The energy you give to this unfulfilled connection is energy taken away from your own growth, from the projects, passions, and pursuits that fade when you neglect them. While you continue to care for a relationship that does not care for you in return, you have been slowly betraying yourself in both small and significant ways, accepting less than what you need, justifying treatment you would never advise a loved one to accept, and making excuses for behavior you would normally encourage someone else to walk away from immediately. Each moment of self-betrayal builds on the last, until you hardly recognize who you have become in the process of loving someone who does not return that love with the same strength. Walking away is not failure, it is maturity. It is not surrender but clarity, not defeat but a deeper form of success reserved for those who value themselves enough to stop accepting love that feels like emotional starvation. There is a level of inner growth required to leave what feels familiar yet unfulfilling, to choose the uncertainty of what may come instead of the certainty of what is clearly not working. It is about respecting yourself enough to close the door on connections that keep you small, stuck, and disconnected from your highest potential. The universe has been attempting to guide you out of this path, offering signs, synchronicities, and openings to leave with grace. Yet you have often interpreted these moments as tests of loyalty instead of invitations to freedom. You must let go of the wrong connection to make space for the right one. This is not just symbolic, it reflects a deeper principle. What you cling to cannot leave, and what you release may return in a transformed way or may not return at all. In either case, both outcomes are beneficial because both restore your sense of inner sovereignty. As long as you continue to hold space for someone who is not truly filling it, you prevent the natural flow of new connections, new possibilities, and new expressions of love from reaching you. These new experiences cannot enter a heart that is already occupied by someone who treats it like temporary space rather than a sacred home. Letting go creates an energetic opening that life naturally moves to fill, but you must first be willing to create that space. You must be able to remain in that emptiness long enough for something new to take shape. This is not about whether they deserve another chance, whether you are being too harsh, or whether you might regret your decision in moments of loneliness when doubt feels strongest. This is about learning to listen to the deepest part of yourself, the voice that has been quietly speaking beneath your justifications, rationalizations, and repeated attempts to make something work that is not aligned. That voice has been telling you this is not it. This is not the kind of love you are meant to settle for. This is not the relationship that supports the version of yourself you are becoming. Walking away is how you finally honor that inner knowing, instead of covering it with hope that has turned into denial. Carl Jung once expressed that nothing can be changed until it is accepted. And perhaps what must now be accepted is that this connection has already given what it was able to give. It has taken you as far as it was meant to take you. The next stage of your journey requires you to continue alone until you meet someone who aligns with your pace and direction. The moment you release them, not with bitterness, but with acceptance, not with anger, but with understanding, your entire energetic field begins to shift and reorganize around this new truth. And from that point, the universe can begin to move in your favor in ways that were not possible while you were still holding on. There is a unique kind of transformation that occurs when you stop forcing outcomes and begin allowing them. When you stop chasing and begin choosing yourself, when you stop waiting for someone else to grant you permission to live fully, and instead give that permission to yourself, the simple act of letting go sends a clear signal into the field of all possibilities that you are ready. Ready for what is real rather than what is only potential. Ready for a love that does not require you to beg for attention, prove your worth, or wait endlessly to be considered enough. Space must exist before it can be filled. And you have been so occupied with them, with the relationship, the hope and the emotional pain, that there has been no room left for anything new to enter your life. When you release them, when you fully and consciously detach and reclaim the energy you had been directing toward them, you become available in a way you have not been since the moment you first met them. You begin to attract connections that are aligned, people who see you clearly, and love that flows naturally instead of relationships that require constant effort to maintain. Share this message if you are choosing yourself, if you are ready to stop waiting and start moving forward. If these words resonate with the deepest part of you that has been waiting for permission to let go, understand that they may return transformed by your absence, changed through loss into someone finally capable of meeting you, humbled into growth they could not reach while you were still present. When you stop chasing and start choosing yourself, when you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to live fully and instead give that permission to yourself, the act of letting go sends a clear message into the field of all possibilities. It signals that you are ready. Ready for what is real instead of what is only potential. Ready for a love that does not require you to beg for it, prove your worth, or wait endlessly for it to decide that you are enough. Space must exist before it can be filled. And you have been so filled with them, with the relationship, with hope, and with heartbreak, that there has been no space left for anything new to enter. When you release them, when you fully detach and reclaim the energy you were directing toward them, you become available in a way you have not been since the moment you first met them. You become magnetic to aligned connections, to people who see you clearly, and to love that flows with ease rather than relationships that require constant effort to sustain. Share this message if you are choosing yourself, if you are ready to stop waiting and start moving forward. If you feel these words resonate in the deepest part of you that has been waiting for permission to let go, understand that they may return transformed by your absence, changed through loss into someone finally capable of meeting you, humbled into growth they could not reach while you were still present. And if they do return, you will know by then whether you even want them back, or whether you have already grown so far beyond the version of yourself that once loved them that going back would feel like a step backward. Or they may not return at all, and you will realize that their absence was actually the gift, that the space they left behind became the opening through which your real life finally began to enter. You do not need their apology to bring this chapter to a close. You do not need them to understand what they took from you, to acknowledge the harm they caused, or to validate your experience of what happened. Closure is not something they provide through final conversations, explanations, or admissions of fault. Closure is something you give yourself when you decide that your healing does not depend on their involvement, that your peace does not require their understanding, that you are allowed to end this story without their agreement. All that is required is your own permission to move forward, your own recognition that you have taken every lesson this connection was meant to teach, your own willingness to keep what was meaningful, release what was harmful, and step into your future without needing them to see you the way you once needed. They may never understand what they lost, may never recognize the value they let go of, and may never reach the level of awareness needed to comprehend the depth of your love or the rarity of your devotion. And that is not something you are responsible for. Their understanding is not required for your freedom. Your understanding is, and you now understand that healing cannot happen in the same environment where the hurt was created. You cannot grow within the same dynamic that once kept you small. You cannot become who you are meant to be while staying attached to someone who depends on you remaining the version of yourself you have already outgrown. Closure happens when you stop looking for it from them and begin creating it within yourself. It is the moment you decide the story is complete, not because it ended as you wished, but because you are choosing to stop adding chapters to a book they left unfinished long ago. You close the cycle by releasing them from the role you once assigned to them, by accepting that they were never meant to be your forever, by appreciating the lessons while refusing to repeat the experience. Your power has always been yours. You were simply waiting for their permission to use it. But permission is unnecessary when you are sovereign, when you are whole, when you are ready to stop remaining a student and begin acting as the author of your own becoming. There is a future waiting beyond this release, a version of your life so different from what you have known that you will one day look back and understand why life never allowed you to settle, why the door kept closing no matter how often you tried to force it open, and why this person could never become what you needed them to be. Someone is coming who will not make you question your worth, will not force you to interpret silence or decode mixed signals, and will not require you to reduce yourself to fit their limited capacity for connection. This experience has been preparation, the refining process that removed your tolerance for half-love, partial commitment, and potential that never turns into reality. And when the right person arrives, you will recognize them not through intensity or confusion, but through ease, stability, and a sense of freedom that replaces anxiety, doubt, and constant emotional negotiation. Your real love story is only just beginning. Even though you may not be able to see it from where you are standing in the aftermath of this experience, even though it may feel impossible that anyone could ever make you feel the same way again, or that you could open your heart after it has been so deeply hurt. But you will, because that is what happens when a heart is truly cared for. It heals, it expands, it becomes even more capable of depth, connection, and devotion than it was before it was broken. Silently thank this person for the lesson, for showing you clearly what you do not want, so that you can immediately recognize what you do want, for loving you in a way that ultimately taught you how to love yourself more fully. Then move forward without turning back, without checking if they are watching, and without waiting for them to return. Your next chapter does not include them, and that is not a loss, but a gain, not an ending, but the beginning of everything you have unknowingly been preparing for.